Marshall Davis Jones is an artist, a vocal coach, an actor, and an author. He has shared the stage with will.i.am, Simon Sinek, and more recently, Marshall has played himself in a Ray Romano movie. In the following conversation, you'll hear the unique moments that made a difference in his life-work narrative. This conversation was recorded at Bick Works at Mocha and My Story Vault. My name is Dr. Dennis Rebelo. Welcome to My Story Vault. So my first guest for this series of 50 episodes is Marshall Davis Jones. And I've invited different people, and he is my first guest for episode 001. Different people I've met along the way in building learning initiatives, whether as a professor or as a chief learning officer or president of an institute, as I was when we met over 10 years ago. So welcome, Marshall Davis Jones, from California to the Berkshires. Good to have you in the vault today, man.
Good to be here.
Yeah, right on.
A vault.
Yeah, it's a vault, man.
Yes.
Yeah, you weren't afraid, right, when you had to push the door back to get in? Yeah, hey, well, by the way, we don't get a chance to do this because we're like passing, like we're catching up and checking in along the way. But we don't get a chance to hold this space. So thanks for allocating that time to be a friend of mine in conversation.
Yeah, very welcome.
Yeah, you bet. So tell people what you do, man. Like tonal influence. You just did a workshop here for leaders in Berkshire County. What is that, tonal influence? I mean, people think you're a voice coach, you're a voiceover artist. You've been in this 4 Seasons ad for artists. Like, have you did this viral 2 million view poetry slamming touchscreen poem, and it just blew everyone's mind because it's totally relevant today in 2024 as much so as it was in 2011. Yeah. So what is tonal influence, man? I asked you the question, then I just gave you an infomercial about yourself.
No, it's okay.
Look, I'm a fan, man. What can I say? What can I say, man? Come on.
It's I don't mind it because what I would have said 2 years ago is different from what I would have said 3-4 years ago and now. And so tonal influence, I can't talk about it without talking about mind, body, speak, which is the umbrella that I created this concept under, which is, your mental model and your physical models are, they emerge out of your voice. And so your tone of voice has an impact on other people's behavior. And so wanting to give people the insight, not only to, there's a lot of things that you described were more of my active use of my voice, but the ability to listen to other people with a bit more clarity and understanding because their intentions, the things that matter to them, the next thing they're about to do, you can hear these things. And so tonal influence is just as much about using your speaking voice as it is to using your listening ear to better, ride the wave between two people or you and a group and yourself.
So this sounds a bit like you're a human scientist, but in the world of the applied use of voice. Is that fairly accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. But if you told people that, it'd probably confuse people.
Man, absolutely. You're like, what exactly do you mean? And, coming to some place where, it's funny because Mind Body Speak is the company. And then I wrote tonal influence because I wanted to have.
So this is the book for folks. Yeah. This is the book that Marshall wrote. Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I need a noun. So what does Mind Body Speak teach or train? And it's like, tonal influence. That's a noun. Okay, it's a thing. And then that was like, well, let's just go with that. But returning to Mind Body Speak, it became. It's like, you create something, you leave it, because I didn't even really, change my URL to my website and all of that. I didn't even use the term mind, body, speak anymore. But it was like, oh, no, this was actually good enough, mind, body, speak, So
that's it. So it's probably not something you can find at a local college, how to study mind, body, speak. Although you can study communications, you can study rhetoric.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the intersectionality of how your body is influenced by your mind, and your mind, your body en route to saying something as a manager, as a leader. It sounds like it's connected to leadership. It's connected to public speaking, relationship management, all of these things. What I'm interested in diving into a bit is your life narrative, because it is it's apparent that over the years, as I've worked with people and collided with people, good returns on collision, that these people have thought about different points of interest, moments that actually sometimes don't become super clear right away. But as the longer you live, right, Marshall, the longer you live, it appears to be, as a human being, that you can look back at moments and have more clarity and understanding of the significance of the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not asking you to give me every one or give us every one of those, but, take us back to Marshall as a child studying. Were you obsessed with drama, rhetoric, spoken word? Were you interested in people, leadership, getting people to do things? What was Marshall doing at 8 years old?
Oh, sure. Oh, specifically at 8.
Well, all right, fine. You can go to 6 if you must, but
I'll go a little further because
okay,
I didn't start talking until I was 3.
People would find that hard to believe.
Probably. Oh yeah. There's a lot of people that'll be like, then you didn't stop.
Yeah.
But there was this concern that there was something wrong. My mom was not of that mind. She was like, no, what's going on with my son? But he's fine. But I don't even know what my,
meaning that you were healthy, you were breathing fine, you were eating, you were playing, you just weren't speaking.
Just wasn't talking. So,
okay.
Having a child myself, trying to imagine because 18 months is usually when, the walking and talking kind of emerge at the same time. So there's basically a year and a half of that tenure of learning language or, demonstrating language. I didn't do it at all. I think imagine in child years is a very long time to not say anything. And
with the mother anticipating like first words.
Oh, of course.
And
of course.
Maybe some I love yous along the way.
Yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about that, it's like, oh no, I had my silent retreat for half of my life up until that point. So like technically, but yeah, I was just fascinated with words first, and the idea that words come together. I remember my mom had the word processor. This is back when you had to type to get into the computer. It's unfathomable for the kids now to even think about that. Like, imagine you had to type in an access code so that your phone could be your phone. That's what we're talking about here. Ancient. But yes.
You aged well, brother. You aged well.
Hey, man. Come on. About. They still card me.
It's the jujitsu.
They card me when I want to go buy champagne, and I take that as a compliment. Sitting at the computer, and I remember just weird stuff. Like I would just type. Because I saw my mother typing all the time, and I would just type. And trying to decipher
what was
the
mom
words.
Doing with the computer back then?
Oh,
was
man,
she
at the house. She worked doing like data entry, from my understanding, from before I was born or when I was born. And then,
one of the first remote workers, clearly, right?
Yes,
but this is way pre-COVID, by the way. Yeah.
Man, we had a computer in the house. And so the typing, it was like words are coming out. And I was also obsessed with reading people's minds. Like I always wanted to predict. I was like 5. I was like, look at my mom talk. And in my head, I'm like, what is she gonna say next? And come to find out that that's just kind of how the brain actually winds up working anyway, is that we have, we essentially in our minds, that's what makes comedy so amazing, is that a good comedian will, break the predictions so well that it makes you laugh. But yeah, our brains are like, we're essentially attempting to complete other people's thoughts before they do. Literally,
I'm curious. So obviously, you weren't practicing metacognition at 3. But you weren't thinking about thinking, but when did you first recollect, as you kind of go back and do an inventory of your sort of narrative accounting, right?
Yeah.
When did you first say, oh my gosh, you know what? I've always been this sort of like predictor kid where
weirdo.
If you must,
yeah.
When did you first catch sight of that? Like, was it something that prompted you in your current professional life, or was it years ago that you're like, hey, I really love language? Like were you 16, 18, thinking about college, high school, debating somebody, arguing, predicting, watching? Like, when did you realize that you had this innate sort of urge to predict really human behavior, in particular voice and word choice?
I think that like I probably would be able to pull any life event and just be like, man, I wish I would have saw that coming, But as some sort of pattern generation, I used to play with Legos and to make the toys that my mom couldn't afford. And so there was this like, you can take these bricks and then like my imagination and what I wanted to utilize my imagination to experience, the Legos allowed me to do that. Right. So it's like, I want to play with like a great white shark because Jaws was cool at the time. And, I saw the toy great white shark and didn't have one. So like make one, or like the Batman toy. I think in some odd way, there was this understanding or recognition that realities are built with smaller blocks. And it just so happened that words was a form of reality, or language is a form of reality built of small building blocks called words. And it was very parsed. I think my relationship to language is parsed like that. Like I wasn't trying to make complete sentences. It was more like, let me find that word and then that word and then that word and then that word. And then, you learn, you can put words together like this. You read Dr. Seuss books, with some of them filled with words that made no sense, but you understood what the story was, the building blocks of that. And, he was genius for doing that, because allegedly he wanted to write books that would make kids want to read because they were having a learning to read problem. And so books used to be like, Sarah sees a bird. And they were like, kids are not reading this. They're not finding anything. So, Dr. Seuss gets on the job, writes The Cat in the Hat, and the rest is history. But the building blocks of words and sounds to create realities. And then, you look at those books and they're so zany, right? And wild. And so I think to some degree, wanting to build worlds, wanting to, regardless of the materials that I had, if I had to start with raw material, I'll be fine. And, it just manifested into all of these other things.
So from Legos, right, came imagining toys that helped you recollect, as I understand it, like a way to think about the way you also related to words and choosing words. So that's a pretty young realization, because I would imagine maybe you're playing Legos now, but this is like something that you probably, your Lego days were 6, 7, and 8. Is that fair?
Yeah,
like, right around 8 and 9.
Yeah.
So you realized it early on that you liked pieces of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, repurposed.
Repurpose.
Yeah.
Okay. And that things were made of smaller things.
Yeah.
Which kind of is like understanding how things are organized, how things work, how complexity comes from simple stuff. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. So then what? Take us through. You're in New York at this point, playing with Legos and figuring out language, man.
Yeah. I mean, all of this stuff, it seems fragmented, for lack of a better term, because they're running concurrently, not relating to each other per se. I'm thinking, here's words which it seems that other people want from me. And I don't recall anyone saying, hey, Marshall, you don't talk. The idea that there's these things and, you're like, okay, well, you need to have some in order to, like a bag of words almost to talk, to communicate. And so when we collect those and when you think about like the toys that you play with as a youngster, some of that is also social, where you want to relate to your peers because, they'll talk about their toys, they'll talk about those things, and you want to be a part of that somehow. And so, making a way in some odd way to be a part of the world that I'm living in, right? So I'm not talking. It seems like I'm not a part of the world that I'm living in. If I don't have the experience of these objects, I'm not a part of the world that I'm living in. And, it just was like, I'll make a way somehow to be a part of the world.
Do you recall like your first expression, or maybe even your mother or a relative saying, "Oh, I remember when you first started speaking"? Is there any recollection of that?
That's actually a great question, because we don't. It's more like BCAD kind of like, this is not discussed like, and then he said words and then we all said, but it would be curious. Like I would want to know, like, so what did I say when I started?
Because at this point you're 3, so you could potentially in your 3s remember a little bit, but it's almost a reconstruction of memory, right? Through people retelling these oral sort of snippets.
Yeah,
they probably just accepted you. It sounds like it's so. I guess this guy, he thought about it a little bit, too much, but now he's all right. Let's let him go.
Right, man. You know what?
And there was no help, right? There was no like,
not that I recall,
therapeutic sort of like today, right? No. If a child doesn't speak by 18 months, we have specialists, right?
Yes,
it's like a batting coach for a kid who will maybe or maybe not continue to play baseball, but you have to speak to live in the world typically, or human intelligence presumably matters, even though maybe that muscle has atrophied a little bit. So now we have you speaking, you're building Legos, you're looking at the world and the sort of pieces that make it and other things that are in it. You're an athletic looking guy. Did you participate in sports as a young man?
Not like through school. I was part of a youth group that was it was a little prohibitive on those kinds of things. And so, I was always into stuff like, when you were, going outside to play football in the park was something you did as a kid, You
did that type of thing. So you played in like this classic sandlot kind of situation.
Just,
stickball. And this is in New York?
New York. I used to live in the South. I lived in Georgia for 2.5 years, between 6 and 8.
Okay.
Which, really kind of gave me this, you go from the city of like, New York and that kind of energy to Columbus, Georgia, and the pace changes.
Columbus, okay.
Yeah. Very, it was like bustling, but it was a different, we weren't too far away from the city, but, the pacing, the accent, if you can imagine me having a little Southern drawl coming back to New York, man, that was fun. It was a good time. Going yonder and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you roll back into New York, you're a little bit over 8, around 8. Yeah. Let's just say 8, right? I don't know why we started with 8. Now we're back at 8. It's a nice number, right?
Yeah, no, it is a beautiful
Infinity
number.
And beyond. So you're 8 years old, you're back in New York. What's going on now for Marshall Davis Jones, this poetry slamming voice coach?
Not doing none of that.
You're doing none of that. What are you doing? Tell us what you're doing.
I don't know. So when came back north, and, started to go to school in Jersey City, and kind of getting reacclimated to reunite with my mom. It hadn't been a couple of years.
So you went down with other relatives?
Oh, yeah. I lived with my granddad.
Okay.
He was, you can, and to be fair, a lot of what I do now was because I was down there. My granddad, he had the 8-track in his car, and he would always play music, and he would have me.
So for those who don't know what an 8-track is, it's as big as this book. No, not as big as that book, but it's about this, maybe a little bit like this, right? And it slid in. It was a giant, thick cartridge, really.
Right. It's basically if you put your iPhone in your car and on the iPhone is the songs and there's only 8 of them, right? Like that's
and it may or may not work depending on humidity. Yeah.
Man, listen,
Come on.
Gosh,
down in Georgia, come on,
yo.
So you're with your grandfather. Is it fair to ask?
Yeah.
Well, what prompted you to live with Grandpa?
Oh yeah, my mom. She just had some decisions to make, and that was the best decision she could make.
Yep.
And and I thank her for it. He would have me listen to these songs, and he'd say, "Hey, what instrument is that? What instrument is that?" And I didn't know at the time, but he was training my ear. He was training my ear to kind of listen for layers and not just for what is happening. You hear the song and you might pay attention to the lyrics, but he was asking me to do this. And funny enough, between the ages of 13 and 30, I hadn't seen him. I went to Georgia I went to Atlanta to do some work, and I rented a car and I drove to the house. And it's something so strange when you go to somewhere that you saw when you were a kid as an adult, and how big everything was when you were a kid, like how big the house was to me, because I was 6, 7, 8 and much smaller. And we sat on the porch, and he said to me, in the military, I had this workshop called active listening.
This is your grandfather?
It's my granddad, yeah.
Recollecting the class.
Recollecting the class. And I recognized that that's what he was doing, was he was teaching me what he was learning. And it just really shaped the nuance. And it gave me this idea, later down the line, that there's everyone that I meet, they have layers beneath what I'm seeing. So this assumption was everyone has a story. There's something that I'm looking at right now, but and I can judge that for what I see. But I bet you if I listen long enough, there's a story there underneath that. Yeah. And, it started to, that didn't just influence my thinking.
It was a 2-year training program that you were in with Grandpa, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Unaffiliated with higher education, but affiliated with his military experience. So it was definitely like some pedagogy there, right? There was definitely a structure to how he was, but it was applied learning.
Yeah.
It was applied learning, right? It wasn't like, here's a note. It was like, here's music, real music, buried in the real music, go.
Yeah. Yeah. But it makes me wonder, like, you do professional development in the military, the military is always what they say 20 years ahead of us, whatever what was, I haven't actually asked this question, just what was going on at the time that was the thing. He was a highly decorated veteran.
What division?
You know what?
Was he?
He was in the Army.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always saw his like in the closet, because I had the room that I had was, the spare room, but in that room there was these jackets, and I always saw them, and there were all these like pieces and stuff, but I didn't know what I was looking at. I'm like, come to find out when he died.
Fancy clothes, right?
Yeah, his fancy clothes, all these decorations and stuff on them. But you would never know. He didn't talk much.
He passed.
He's gone.
And when he died, you just started to share. When he passed, you said.
Well, it's so wild, because when I went to see him, his wife was not well, and she passed. I think it might have been 1.5 years after I saw them. She passed, and then he died a week later.
Oh,
yeah, it was like that happens like that sometimes. You're like there's a story about this couple. They got into a car accident, and they were on the 2 beds next to each other. One died, but the heart monitors for both of them kept running until the other one died about an hour later. It's just like, just people that are that connected.
Yeah. In psychology, it's like collective resonance is like when a group, 2 or more, are feeling sort of unspoken.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that somatic sort of heart mathy stuff that goes like literally, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So your how did you refer to your grandfather? Did you call him
Grandpa. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Grandpa was a decorated guy. You went back to Georgia. You saw him when you were doing a professional engagement.
Yeah. I was doing.
What was that like when everything was bigger than you expected it to be, and you saw him, and you're like, "Wow, I lived in a smaller house than my mind created."
Yeah, but man, there was that. It was just so like, whoa, like just recognizing. It was like a shock to my system because it makes you think about memories and how they live in the mind, and I had to update my memory, and it was like such a shock of like, I think it was,
why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is?
Like for a young person, because I think it's a common phenomenon, right? Like you get me thinking, and I'm thinking, well, I thought my old farmhouse, which you think farmhouse is big, but my house wasn't as big when growing up as I thought it was. But it seemed big. It seemed like the yard was gigantic. And then I think, my gosh, I don't live in a gigantic house now, but my front yard is far bigger than my backyard was in my other house.
Well, I wonder, there is this, I guess, the relativity of sheer size, do
you think it has anything to do with sort of like our singularity of focus when we're younger? Like that we just see this one thing, and to your point, and it seems like small, like this diminutive person that I am relativistically. I'm this little person. I'm like 6, 7, 8-year-old Marshall. This is a big house compared to my physical size. I think that's definite. But I wonder if I guess it's a little bit of a pondering for me, right? I'm contemplating it as you're sharing it, that, sometimes I think that maybe, not to insert this as an opinion you have, but, like I'm only thinking of my life as this little person and this big thing, and I don't see it relative to anything else. I just see it in relationship to me, and it's big. End of story. Next part of my day. It's kind of interesting.
It is.
Oh, my apologies for getting too.
No. It's no. It's it makes you.
You're a thinker. That's why I dove that way.
Yeah,
right?
you invite this whole thought because you start to wonder when you begin to recognize yourself amongst the, what is it, like the codependent, independent, interdependent model. So it's like, okay, cool. When you recognize that you are actually a part of something larger. And so the size of things relative to you becomes smaller.
I wonder about the talk too, right? Yeah. Like people just talking about how, the enormity or the house, the shopping, the job. And we think, ooh, I'm little, that's big adult. And therefore there's like, I don't want to say language games, but language games that help us. Well, we can continue that over coffee later. But I'm interested now in thinking about your life. And back in New York, Jersey City, you're back there with lessons under your belt on how to be an active listener. You're engaged in some youth stuff.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Well, what
does youth stuff look like then?
Well, between 8, 9, 10, 11, I was in the 3rd grade and 4th grade in Jersey City. Then I went to school in Harlem, living in Jersey City, which was not legal, by the way. But my sister,
you're off the hook. Statute of limitations.
Exactly. My sister's grandmother worked in the office at the school in Harlem, Patrick Henry Elementary School on 103rd Street, Madison Avenue. And, so I had a 2-hour commute every day. 2.5-hour commute by myself on multiple modes of public transportation between 5th, 6th, 7th grade. And so, there was a lot of going between places, and then, having a 2-hour commute to school, then school, a very limited time. Like I would sneak time to like be a kid, I guess, and then, that long commute home. And I had a lot of that, just more of like being a kid traveling between places that I need to be. for whatever reason. And so, during those years, I don't really remember much of like being like the kid, that, you go outside, you go to the park sometimes on the weekends. My sister's family was in Harlem, so we'd spend time there and, be with the cousins and stuff like that.
Sounds like you were moving a lot.
Oh yeah,
like physically moving too.
Physically,
yeah.
Every couple of years, I was in a new school. The longest I stayed in any school was high school for 4 years.
Okay,
so every other schooling experience up until the 9th grade was 2 years or less. Here, and another 2 years. Yeah, so there was always a transition point. Pick up, start over. Pick up, start over.
Looking back, what did that teach you? That like every couple of years reset. Did that give you any sort of?
I think it is. It's it primes certain kind of decisions. Where you think about decisions that require a longer tenure. Those decisions are less evident because they're not in the view. You're like, okay, 2 years, this will all be different. The 2 years will be somewhere else new.
So you think that's how you work in 2-year chunks?
I think, I think that I've started to, in doing this work, I spent the last, 2011 is when I started researching. So 13 years.
In the voice business, helping people understand the use of voice.
Oh man, I didn't care about anybody else understanding voice.
You care about
first few. I cared about when I first started. Forget about it. I was a competitive poet. I was like, competitive advantage. I'm gonna make my voice deeper. Believe it or not, it didn't sound like this when I started. In fact, if you want to know what it sounded like, the video that you posted of Touchscreen, that was pre voice work. So my voice, if you listen to it, it's like, it's
up here, right?
It's way up here. Like, hey guys,
iPad. No, not that high. All these things without making eye contact. 10 tabs open, hoping to be part of this revolution. 5,000 pins online, only 3 I can. It wasn't that high, people. Come on. You weren't 13, man.
No.
But it wasn't this like variant, sort of like more deep. I mean, voice that you have, which is, aligned more so with who you are, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I remember once having a conversation with somebody about some of the, lessons that you were doling out. And I was like, wow, everybody has an audio profile. That was a catch that I got from you. And that when our voices are higher, usually sometimes we're escaping something.
Yeah.
We're not sitting in, like we were talking about running when I picked you up at the airport or picked you up from the pickup in the airport.
Yeah, that's right.
And had dinner and how like you sitting in a run is really accepting the run. Sitting in a jujitsu sort of scenario when you're entangled with another human body is like just sitting in it is sometimes the beauty of the state.
Yes.
Like we're in that state, right? And it's transient. So popping back to you, because this is like just to be able to have this type of sacred time, right? It's like there's like some sanctity to this whole thing because it's we just don't have it. So I just want to return to it. You're coming out of, before we get to Touchscreen, although people, you should check out Touchscreen, just Google Touchscreen, YouTube, couple million views, a prophetic poetry slam. We played as a part of courses all over through our certified coaches with the nonprofit that I started, NRG, and they're blown away by this, how important the message is. And this is the message that you were giving people in 2011, 13 years ago. And I have to actually contain people and tell them, okay, we have to stop making comments about Touchscreen in a live class, right? It's unbelievable. So do check it out, folks. Touchscreen. But getting back to you and this sort of life work narrative, this journey of individuation, as a Jungian psychologist would often refer to this as individuation. Becoming somebody, right? We all want to become somebody. You don't have to be a Jungian psychologist to want to become somebody or to be fancy pants about it, right? Everybody wants to be somebody, right? you're now back in Jersey City. You're back and forth, back and forth. Finally, you land in 4 years. You're in the high school. What's high school experience like for you? Like, are you, sort of this new kid on the block because you weren't from everyone's eighth grade, or did it not really matter because it was a melting pot of people from different perspectives and places?
Yeah, I mean, I'd come back to Jersey City for the end of 7th grade and all of 8th grade. And so there was a little familiarity, but I was still, I guess, a little new, but I didn't know anything about that because I was so used to transferring from one place to another. And so, there was all right, here I am here, and so not too bad.
It's like an NFL athlete. I work with all these NFL athletes, right? Yeah. It's like they just go, "Oh yeah, you're going to Seattle," and then like a person's gone, or "Hey, we're taking you. You're not going to be at the Bears anymore. You're going to Atlanta."
Right.
Like you just go. It's almost like you kind of remind me you were just like, okay, adapt.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Quickly.
So you're in high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, man. And so, I was also a part of this church. And so the way the church was set up, it was very insulated. So it was like, I'll go to school. But then, I didn't really do anything, at school, like the church really consumed.
Recreationally, you mean? There weren't many windows.
And we couldn't do that kind of stuff. And so
the church it sounds like we couldn't do, sounds like, it was restrictive. So, come on now. That smile is like, we're going to go right there. So talk to me about church life. Give me a little understanding, if you would.
Man, well,
give us. We want to know.
I mean, it was the best of times, worst of times.
Is that a smirk? I see.
I'm trying to, it's everything in hindsight is, not so bad. But and during the time, the team ministry that I was a part of, man, we had a good time. So our ministry, and particularly, I think,
was a Christian
church, and I think being a teenager in these kinds of organizations when they like this, there's something about the vibrance of teenagehood where it doesn't affect you the same way it affected like the adults, like the restrictive stuff, because we're still like in the fun phase of life, and like we're doing the fun phase of life together, like as a group. So you don't really know that you're like a part of a thing until a letter comes out in 2012.
Whoa.
Not 2012, 2000 and 2012. They were in 2003. A letter comes out. So I'm at the end of high school. Mm-hmm. This letter comes out, man, exposing all of the stuff that, all the mechanisms of control that the church had utilized. Man, I was already out because there was this girl that I liked, and I had already left. So
demystify it.
Demystify
me, others, especially others with this. Like, so letter comes out, people go, okay, all right, I guess the church wasn't pure.
It's pure. How do you say it, man? Look,
listen, you're the word guy, man. You got the Legos. You got the Legos. Go on,
you got the Legos. Like, I'm not gonna. Like, it could be classified as a cult.
Okay.
You could classify it.
The continuum is cult is over here.
Yeah.
And this is sort of like autonomy, pop into church, pop out of church. You're saying you're on this side.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You couldn't even see family.
Not like here, right? Okay. It's
we know. I mean, we didn't have matching outfits, nothing like that, but it was very much so the social boundaries were very tight.
Okay.
You like once you became
what's
a
the
member,
intention?
The intention was, the idea that, their church was the one true church and everybody else was going to hell. I mean, like,
okay. All right. Well, there's no second guessing the intention.
They were like, look, and we need to save as many souls and all of that. And, so it was very active, sharing your faith. And, so, I mean, again, I think that.
So there was solidarity in the relationships, like, right? I mean,
yeah. And very, very rigorous kind of like checkpoints of like managing the behavior of people within the church and stuff like that. And again, as a teen, it's restrictive and, these kind of things, but we were just in a different time in our lives that I think that the adults that were part of the church, they were experiencing it very differently. But the ones that were part of the teen ministry, I think that we invigorated them. I think that they looked forward to like hanging with us because it gives them that vitality. It's like, you're stewarding to somebody's life. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of decisions I probably would have made in different directions had I not had the church in my life. And so I don't, I never really looked at it.
Meaning.
Oh man, I think I would have been a dad much sooner. I probably, just kind of in wanting to be a part of something, I could have found myself a part of other things. I'm saying that young, rambunctious kids can get a part of it. I wasn't necessarily like the model church member.
Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
Right,
so
right.
like,
as you pointed out, it was the teenage years, right?
Yeah, 13 to 18.
13 to 18 is a big
17,
slice, right?
Yeah,
of your life where you're being in the world and you're not necessarily doing after action reports on your behavior and thinking about it. But at the same time, the church was evidently doing after action reports to making sure you did behave.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And was that lack of autonomy something that in choice that it sounds like there was lack of autonomy? So let me check in on that. Was there lack of autonomy and choice? Did you have you had to attend things, right? It was a regimented sort of orientation to church.
You knew where you were going to be on Wednesdays, on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays.
Okay.
And then, we had our discipling partners. Okay. So you knew you were going to be, and that was basically like someone who's like a deputy. Okay. Like where you talk to them, you go into confessional about what you've done, and then they like open the Bible and tell you about stuff. So,
all right, it's a little teaching.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just to say, I got rebuked a lot, and rebuking is like, it's like when the hammer comes down.
Is this by the deputy?
Oh man, by everybody. Like I was just like the stuff that I would do. Like
what, you got to give us an example, something that we can bring into focus.
Oh my gosh! So one time, I remember we were on the train, and we were coming from New York, going from Solid Rock. So I think it was the first Saturday of the month, all of the teen ministries from all over, from New York and New Jersey would meet. So that's the other thing. Like the adults weren't having this kind of time. We cyclically got together, and you got like 500 teenagers in the room, like just having a good time. So you don't you're not thinking, come over Solid Rock, and somehow we all don't get on the same train car. And my boy Josh, like I'm on the glass and I'm looking through, and Josh goes like this, like, why don't you just do this? And, I guess I thought it would be a good idea to shoulder the window of the train. The window immediately, the train stops. And, I have to go to the next, I got to go to the car now and explain like what were you thinking? You know what I mean?
Another review.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, but it was hilarious because one of our the team leaders was ex-military and like a third degree black belt in Taekwondo, super disciplined cat. And it's him and Victor, my boy Victor, like supposed to be taking notes. So Angelo sits across from me and goes, stone face. I gotta like compose myself because it cracks me up just thinking about it. Because he goes, I'm trying to impress the ladies, Marshall. And Victor, he's like taking notes. He's like, because he's supposed to be serious, so he's snotting out his laughter, and we're supposed to be taking this serious. And but yeah, so I think it's just regular, just being a kid type stuff. But just, I was also very aggressive and like, you
were physical.
Very physical. Very physical. And so like all of the stuff, like, oh, you want to fight? You want to, we can't even play fight. We can't do nothing. I used to play the dozens at high school all the time where, you survive high school by learning how to insult people because people are going to insult you, especially if you're not wearing the latest, outfit or whatever. People got jokes. You go to the church and, like, Marshall, you can't say stuff like that to people. I'm like, do you know what lunchtime is for me on a daily basis? I'm getting creamed here.
So let's bring this in, right? You're getting creamed. You're learning to, discipleship of sorts, right? How to be, behave, so to speak. And you're this kinesthetically intelligent, right? Think about like Howard Gardner's work, right? Around the intelligence is like, you're this kinesthetically intelligent. I've got to get moving. I'm shouldering windows through trains. And now you're using language.
Yeah.
Wait a second, to kind of defend yourself and to offend, to create space, to say, I belong here at this school. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So did language become a bit more of a martial art? Not to say that you were a linguist, martial artist, but you, is that, tell us a little bit about that phase of, you don't have any idea I have to do this at lunch.
Yeah. I mean, I like the way you said that with like, I'm only doing what I must. But just the idea of, you have this affiliative language, right? Where like, oh, we're friends. And then you have the combatives of language when it's like, and there's like degrees because we're not friends and we're saying things. And then we're friends, but this is how we get along. And, part of the friendship is like ribbing your friend, but you just learn, you play the dozen, you snap, and you do all of that.
So when for people who don't understand what play the dozen, what does that mean?
Oh, that's where all your like your mother jokes and all your like look at those shoes, like look at those Air Jordans, you know what I mean? Like what are you doing? But like typical things, but you recognize that you kind of have to earn. It was like this rites of passage of earning your place in an environment, and sometimes it's hostile, and the snapping is not so much. When you look at it, it's like, if you have good snaps, that's a good thing. Like it's helpful if you're good. But there's like also another thing. It's the resilience in the face of that. I mean, because it's just like getting into a fist fight, right? Like part of the fist fight is not even the fight itself. It's the fact, the will to fight that sometimes people are testing. They're like, they want to see, if they can pick on you, it's like you don't have the will to defend yourself, right? And so that you get evaluated by that in certain places. And so you go into this whole environment where you snap, you do all that. It's like you can have the good comebacks, but people are also watching how you respond to like someone throwing.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. Like,
isn't that true in life though? Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. The people watching, right?
Exactly.
They're like, what are you up to?
Exactly.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So to me, like listening to you, right. And for those of you who have seen or heard Touchscreen, that was sort of like punchy too.
Absolutely. Oh, touchscreen. Oh yeah.
Like that was like snappy.
Yeah.
So when you and I like were speaking earlier, it's like some language is like eating sweets and some is like ta-ta.
Oh yeah.
It's it's like hitting a heavy bag or for those who like boxing, it's like hitting pads or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
So you realized you could control outcomes and anticipate outcomes. I'm thinking because I'm going back to when you were 3 and you were thinking and you were playing Legos and you're like watching your mom and you're like, I wonder what she's going to say. And I wonder if I can predict.
Yeah.
And now here we are after an education from grandpa, being an active listener, bravely listening, as you say in your book, right?
Yeah.
And also being able to discern in the listening. It's not just listen, it's to discern, to discriminate details of the type of instrument or to understand someone's intention when they're ribbing you. Is that my friend? Kind of being playful?
Yeah.
Or is this kind of guy, he's not like in the know. I'm going to have to come at him a little bit. I'm going to have to put them in their place.
Yeah.
So before we jump to, hey, I just caught sight of sort of like a punchiness to Touchscreen and a punchiness to you in high school. What does high school end up being for you, other than the sort of the claiming of that punchiness and like the language as a mechanism for defense or friendship or Like, well, what does it become for you? Like, are you prepping for college in your mind? Are you saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just glad to get out of here. Like, what's going on? I mean, I've known you again for over 10 years, man. In and out, passing, high fiving, catching up for a little while.
Yeah.
5 years, 6 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, catching up at a particular intersection of our lives. But like, man, like, what is it? Like, we haven't gone this far, man. Like, what are you thinking about? You're in high school. A lot of kids listening to this podcast, or parents, educators are probably like thinking to themselves, like, they don't know what they want to do, man. So like, it's not, this is about you, but I'm just giving you its context, right?
Okay,
like, like you don't have to filter anything because we want truth, man.
Fair enough. I was about to say, you're like, this parents listening and kids preparing for college. Well, the first thing is this, I thought I was going to go to Montclair State University. I don't even remember why, but I also, I had gotten this motif. My mother decided to, buy me this musical production equipment thing. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to pursue music. I remember going and saying, I'm not going to college. I'm going to pursue music. And, that's what I'm doing.
What was the response from mom or family?
Man, it was, when I think about it, I'm not sure. Maybe there was some disappointment, but I also moved out of my house before at the end of senior year. So,
okay,
it was like,
because you're
chasing that girl, man. Chasing that girl.
Chasing that girl.
All
right. Okay, all right.
The thing that I decided though was, even though I wasn't going to college, I said, well, I'm not going to be dumb. So I remember the day I decided I wasn't going to school, I went right to the bookstore and just picked stuff off the shelf that I thought would be useful for my mind. And
that you were genuinely interested in at that point.
Yeah, just like, what here? I remember picking up Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power from the bookstore. It's a very large book. It's basically a Bible in size. You go to the self-help section, which you're like, I'm not going to school, so I'm going to help myself. And then just other things around other topics of interest. And I think that began in 2003, just this mind to research, because once I, knew I didn't know things, it was like, oh, what else do I not know?
Did you? So you went into some of this reading with an interest, but then realized your knowledge of a particular area. For instance, let's say we're using Robbins as the example.
Yeah.
Human motivation, or being inspirational or effective.
Yeah.
It wasn't sufficient, so you had to do more. You understand it? Is that what?
Yeah, I mean, first, there was this period where I was sort of researching things about like the history of religion, because I just found out that the organization that I was a part of was, that there was something not congruent. And so I wanted to resolve that. So I'm like, I'm going into the history of Christianity, the origins of this, that, and the third, any change that happened along the way throughout time, and different, philosophers that took the mantle on different,
so this is Marshall, not matriculated in any school. I love this because of the fact that it shows that your exploration doesn't need affiliation with a school. Obviously, I have a lot of these degree experiences, but to me, like, learning is life, right? And you and I both agree. Doesn't matter if you have a doctorate, you don't have a doctorate. It's you can have your PhD. You're past having doubts by living a life of exploring and coding and figuring and learning, right? And then applying that.
Yeah.
And so what's fascinating, as I hear you recollect you buying those books, is that you then, like most people wait till their junior year to think about declaring a major, and you're like, no. I have a reason to resolve this. I have a motivation. I need to find out what was going on in organization, because the church is an organization, with this organization, the church, so that I can. What was your?
I think that any anything that's coming to you as you're developing is supposed to be how to live.
Okay.
You know.
So you were. Oh, okay, gotcha.
You gotta reconcile. Yeah. Like, you know, you're like, well, if this, and I mean, I think that anybody in any large like org, you know, gets disappointed sometimes in the humanity of things. Like, oh, like, yeah, you can idealize what you think this is, and then you like get closer and then like, oh, or you find out this and it's not that. But this idea that a North Star was there, and then, you know, I had already turned the other way, but then to like look in the rear view and like watch it explode, you know, like there were people that I had talked to that were important to me about like coming to the church or about, and had very visceral experiences when they either would come or stop coming, you know, or would visit, but then they wouldn't go through the whole process. I had become attached to like, oh, I thought I was doing something. I thought I was actually helping people. And so to kind of have all of that rigmarole and all of those emotions about it, and then to find out that I would have led them somewhere. And some of this I'm actually thinking about right now in real time. But yeah, I had to make sense of like, how the hell did I get there? What did I need that it was, you know, I mean, besides my family going, like my mother was going and my aunt was going. So, you know, I was going, you know, but just the optionality and just trying to make sense of that. And, you know, there was a very anti-phase of like everything anti-Christian, and, you know, I just wanted nothing to do with it. And so I was looking for evidence in the contrary.
Were you angry?
Oh, yeah. That, I mean, you know, I would say probably, you know,
disappointed.
You know, I think that anger is just, not all anger, but I think sometimes the demonstration of anger is just veiled disappointment. It's just the, you know, sort of the mind's way of violently leaving, you know, laying waste to this environment, making it uninhabitable, so that, you know, it's like destroy all of this. So, you know, it's like when people go to wreck-it rooms, you know what I mean?
Well, and it's a choice too. I mean, if you're like, you know, the Adlerian psychologist would, and Adler himself would propose that, you know, that's a choice, right? Like something happened to me, I'm bringing it into the now, and I'm choosing anger right now. I choose anger. And to your point, it could be veiled disappointment or vice versa, but I'm choosing it, and kind of makes me feel good to be upset with this. But obviously, you know, you didn't stay upset. No. How did you sort of move beyond upsettedness in your really self-designed education plan to then eventually become this guy who understands rhetoric, whether it's poetic or whether you're voicing and appearing in a Four Seasons featured bit about artists in Hawaii, which he did, by the way. Everybody should Google, YouTube, search Marshall Davis Jones, Four Seasons. It's such an amazing depiction of your capacity to be both bodily, move, not busting windows and trains, doing it safely. I'm glad you explored that. And also, you know, whether you're diving in a boat in that particular promo, or whether you're doing a really an indigenous, you know, honorable dance, or learning to the moves on the beach, you know, you're moving, you know, you're moving over rocks in that promo, right? And so when you're telling and sharing these stories and how you're recollecting them, I'm also thinking about where you have ended up. And you've ended up using these, you know, that the moving Marshall, the speaking Marshall, the checking out the blocks of words and that people use in different cultures to convey meaning to, and I think you say to come home again in this particular promo, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You know, and it sort of punctuates it. you've come home again in your work on yourself, right? Resolving the church situation, creating your own educational pathway, sharing the stage with will.i.am, Simon Sinek. You worked with my friend Chip Conley down at MEA and the work he's doing, really rethinking what it means to be a modern elder and what is middle age really all about. Opportunity to shift beliefs out of your system and put new ones in. And I think he has a famous bit that says, just to honor Chip, because we both know him, he says, there's having an internship mindset, but sort of to be wisdom at work, you have to be a modern elder too. You have to have these lived experiences. And he says, we used to learn, earn, and retire, and now we learn, earn, and need to rewire. And you kind of rewired yourself in terms of your own education plan, and you emerged really not that deep into your life as this poet, but there was something that you once shared that you were pretty mad when you did this touchscreen.
Yeah.
So can you take us to the Bowery or pre-Bowery, where you were this poet in New York after the church days?
Yeah.
So at this point, you're not teaching rhetoric or voice control. You're doing it for yourself, right? Because you're positively selfish. We all have that in us, right? Like, how can I take care of myself?
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I'm going to start doing poetry, like, because I'm bored with Legos. I don't know what's going on, man.
Oh man, I mean, going into slam, I was.
I mean, it's a stage, man, down there. Like it's a stage. It's a scene, right? Can you maybe describe the context of all this? Like, I mean, this is where the poet's poet goes.
Because it's funny because it's an opportunity for. It introduces competition into, something that's supposed to be like, flowers and roses, I used to battle rap. So, this idea of like taking words, walking the line between, collaborative and competitive communication. And so, as a slam poet, the audience is allowed to judge you, 1 to 10, 1 being like, you just
stay home
next time.
Please don't go.
Don't come up here.
Don't do this anymore, man.
And then and then 10 is like you scored like the soccer goal, for the game, and you learn, sentiment. What is it that you start to? It's a very interesting microcosm for crowd control. Okay. For drama, the same way that laughter is for comedy, right? Like the comedian knows if they're effective because people are laughing. If they're not, then it's time to go home. But with poetry, which usually focuses more on the dramatic side of things, you usually don't know as a dramatic performer if you're affecting people because maybe you can see the audience and maybe somebody cries or maybe, but the scoring system kind of flip that on its head. It's like, oh no, you're gonna know right now how you made us feel. And there was mechanisms that you learn like what happens if one of the poets has 30 of their friends in the audience and how that can change things, or how something called score creep, which is like how scores would slowly go up over the night, and it's a mix of maybe the alcohol, but also just the difference in sort of like the heat kind of generally rising. And even though the poems didn't get better, the scores get higher for some reason. Or you look at how, over the course of a night, because it's 3 rounds, you can see how like from round to round, like, the swaying, of the judges in one direction or another.
So what you're saying is the night that you did touchscreen, there were 3 rounds.
Oh yeah. That was 1 round of 3. And that was okay. For... I think I had made it onto the Urbana, the 2011 team. That poem was already 3 years old by the time, it made it there. And,
wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was
2009. So still people are just mesmerized that that the text on the video says 11. It's really 9.
Oh yeah, so that because that was for the Bowery performance.
Yeah.
But the poem I first debuted it at the Nuyorican 2008. I remember when the day I wrote it. So I'm sitting in front of my computer, and I have like 5 social media tabs open because Facebook and MySpace were still volleying for supremacy, and so there were other websites that were so I'm sitting there trying to make sense of where to go next. And at the time, the way the internet, everybody was, traffic control, right? So, I look at being in all these different places, like, the sophistication of today's world was not available where like now you can upload something and then with the right mechanisms post it on 12 platforms simultaneously. There wasn't any of that. You had to be, by myself trying to figure this out. So I was frustrated, like, geez, like, my brain was like, this is too much. It's too much for me. And I was already slamming. And so I utilized slam as a way to say, like, I guess to test my assumptions, like maybe other people think or feel like this. So I'm standing on the corner of Malcolm X Boulevard and Fulton Street in Brooklyn. And I'm kind of walking like a spinning dervish, Okay. And I think that poem was not written down. I had just was walking in like line by line by line by line and just like running it and running it. And I performed it the first time completely from memory.
Wait. You never wrote
it down. No, I only wrote it down after I performed it in a slam to see how it would perform. And then once it performed very well, I had already had it memorized. So I didn't have to write it down until someone asked me for the text. So it was all like in my head.
And people can find the lyrics on Genius. If you,
it's there now.
I'm just bringing them along.
Yeah. No, it's cool. It's cool. But it was one of those like, all right, like a download, if you will. Yeah. And,
were you carrying that feeling with you and just sorting through the lyrics as a way of like sense making?
Yeah. I was just like, this is my frustration with this. And, and I'm just kind of looking at what was disintegrating about it. When I look back on it now, it's a couple things. The reconciliation I make with the technology is, what does it represent about us? Because it clearly works for a reason. And it works very well for something that's very human or something that's very whatever, how. And so you start to kind of like, okay.
Were you frustrated? You were very frustrated.
Oh, I mean, at that time, I was supremely frustrated.
Yeah, right? Supremely, right? That's all the tabs open, and
exactly. It's like, break your phone, but I still used my phone. But it wasn't like I tossed it out the window.
Yeah, I know you didn't just become this, sort of like a technology kind of guy. Yeah, no. But you were frustrated with the way human beings or you yourself, and I'm kind of feeding you some things here just because I'm really curious because you seem to have manifest the frustration with like over dependence of technology or like the fact that you now had to in a world where it's so, as a guy who's like studied a lot of psychology, I'll give you this, it could be accurate. If it's not, you can adjust it. But it sounds like, you had choice again after the church. You could do whatever you want. Then suddenly the technology comes on board. And technology is telling you, you don't have choice, man.
This is what you have to do.
You have to do this. You have to input this.
Yo, that's funny. I mean, you might be tossing that out.
Man.
I didn't think about it like that. I think that for me, writing the piece, one of the things that became clear about slam, Mahogany Brown, she said to me once, she was a host. She's been the host for the Nuyorican for the last, I don't even know how many years now. But one thing she said to me that stuck with me was like, she's like, slam is about universality. That's the tool, because what happens is that when you get on stage and you say something and you see those scores, they reflect their sentiment maps. And, you know, the more you resonate with whatever the current thing is, the higher those scores, at least the way I took it. And so I saw slam as a tool for testing the universality of my assumptions. Like, this is what, you know.
It's your lab. It's your lab, man.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, you can't really, you know, you can't, in order to be universal, you kind of have to zoom out, you know, and at least that's what I thought at the time about something as large as what I was thinking about. It was like, let me zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, zoom out. For that piece, I mean, you know, I have another poem that I would argue did more, zoomed in, that I don't perform anymore. But yeah, like there's, if you're going to zoom out, your bird's eye view for damn sure needs to be clear enough for people to draw all of these connections. And then, you know, if you zoom in, then you zoom in. But yeah, it's just an interesting exercise on what people care about.
But you cared, right? Like, this is my jumping point, like where I see meaning imbued, pressed into the product being the poem.
Yeah.
Like, it was so clear that you were really saying, hey, I don't know if this is right. Do you think it's right? Do you think it's right to have 10 tabs open? Do you think that it's right that we have to, you know, run to the Sprint store to pick blackberries as opposed to go in? And I can't hear, it would be X now, right? Of course, I can't hear what birds, all this, over all this, or nature over all this tweeting, right? It's like you were really somatically, bodily sort of entangled with the language. And to me, like, just as an observer of your career, which has been really lovely to observe, you're now bringing this experience in one of the first labs that you created for yourself, the Slam Lab, to other people in organizations who really have a bit forgotten that they live in their bodies and that their bodies can inform them on how to be really deep listeners, how to hold attention, how their spinal fluid is actually being used or not used in terms of their posture. As you shared with everybody, posture is another way to think about that, is position, and your position is home. And it, to me, it's like kind of beautiful to hear your story, because, you know, reclaiming bodily movement and your physicality through jujitsu and through other exercise, and feeling your body and thinking of the Slam audience as a sentiment map through their scoring, allowed you to kind of see whether or not people heard your voice as being totally influenced by the inside job stuff that you were doing, and how that is more fire, as you would say, than data.
Yeah.
Take it from there, man. I'm just shooting here.
I mean,
I'm just listening, and I'm putting some pieces together myself.
I mean, it's cool to hear things back, you know, like, how does someone else metabolize this, you know, as an experience? I mean, because it's from my own POV that I'm sharing, but hearing, you know, from your side and how you think about things, you know, the laboratory, you know, of being able to test my thinking, you know, even with jujitsu, it's the same thing, you know, it's an arena to test my thinking. It was Slam. I left Slam because I grew weary of testing my thinking by rehearsing certain pain points. Okay. You know, it was like, it's cool, you know, where it's like, yes, this sucks. But at some point you have to do something else. At some point you have to do something about whatever it is. It's like, you know, if it sucks and you're like, oh, it sucks. It's like, okay, you can only do that, I think, healthily, but for so long. You know, if you go to the doctor and you're there and it's like, it hurts, and the doctor gives you a prescription and you just, while they're writing, it hurts, you leave, it hurts, you come back, it hurts, and the doctor's like, did you fill the prescription action? And you're like, no, it hurts. It created a false sense of reward, at least in my opinion. There's people who make a living still and do great work within the space, and so I don't want to condemn it.
Well, this is about you though, so this is about you, right?
Yeah,
I appreciate the tag and flag of it's not.
I mean, I had much more abrasive opinions at one point. I got to tell you the time that the first time that I got on stage to slam, ever, was I had a fedora on, and the host, Helena D. Lewis, she goes, "You look like a poet. You want to slam tonight?" I was like, "Yeah, eager." So, earlier you said that, we're talking to like kids who could decide to go to college or not or whatever they do. So I had this poem that I had written about, my thoughts about higher education. So, remember the judges are chosen, like they like from the crowd. So, read the room, right? Because one group of students were from Columbia. Another group was from Hunter College. Another group was from Queens College. Another group was from Purchase. And another group was from Pace. 5 colleges. And I decided to give them my diatribe about what I think about higher education. Yo, the scores, my boy, he said, he had never seen scores so low in his life at a slam. Like, I think I might have historically broken the record.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And
that was your lesson in audience analysis.
That was a lesson in audience analysis. And also, you think you're helping somebody and you're not. Okay. That's not how you do it. And, when people decide to make life decisions, everyone makes their choices.
Yeah.
And we have, laws in place for certain choices that you make that are like, well, that's illegal, and so you're going to jail. But there's a way to like live and let live. And,
let a wave go by, right?
Yeah,
let a wave go by.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about maybe a big wave for you was like your first gig. That was a big gig as a performer of what you believe. So clearly the Bowery was a big gig, and it brought you to a level of being seen, and as a thinker, not just as a performer, and a lyricist, poet, right? And a feeling, a creature who could feel what was going on in sight. Like, we might want to think about this technology, right? And now I'm wondering, like, okay, I'm a listener. I'm listening to Marshall's story. Oh, did he get on a big stage? And you did. I mean, I said the Will I Am. I said the Simon thing.
Yeah.
Well, when you did that, was it when you did some of these bigger performances? Do you remember the first time you, or maybe it's the first time, but a time when it almost overwhelmed you that you were being looked at as this expert thinker or performer or voice artist? Or did it just did it have, I don't want to be presumptuous, man, like sometimes, like, I remember I taught my first college class when I was 16. I wasn't very good at it. I was 16. I could barely find a parking spot. I was nervous. But I was this like engineering kid, physics kid who invented something that kind of worked, that got some attention in, the state science fair, right? But I remember being on a big stage once in Vegas with hundreds of people in front of me with big screens, and my first big public speaking bit on a topic. And I was like, whoa, this is big. But I sat into it like you would when you get good at it. But I was still like there's something called life enhancing anxiety, which we tend to ignore. We go to the life inhibiting anxiety because it's like we exotify that typically more. But there is anxiety that's good. Was your first event, now I'm rephrasing the question, right? Was it life enhancing, life limiting? Did it have any qualities that we could kind of like, I don't know, talk about?
The first big event was the Will.i.am event. It was actually cool how it came about. So
Will's quite the artist, huh?
Yeah, man. And he was just, he wasn't even like, his capacity that day was not a member of the Black Eyed Peas. It was like, I'm running a conference called Transform. And I remember, here's how it happened. Saul Williams emails me. Now, Saul Williams is like a prominent figure in like the poetry world, right? And he's like, he reposts Touchscreen on his page. And I remember somebody hit me like, yo, Saul posted your poems. Like, yo, it's crazy because when I was in high school, remember I told you my boy Victor was like a super...
He was the note taker.
The guy note taker,
yeah. I got him.
Oh, super music head, like always like, in the crates kind of guy. And he put me on to Saul Williams at a time when I wasn't ready to hear poetry that didn't have the syncopation of rap. I was like, what is this? I thought it was like, this is cool, but I don't understand it. Like, because I was in a different rhythm at the time. So fast forward, I'm in this arena and here's this person who is considered, like a major pioneer. And I had come to respect his work. He posts, he hits me in the thing and goes, Fatima Roberts is going to reach out to you. I'm like, who the hell is Fatima Robinson? Fatima Robinson is a world-renowned choreographer. Like she's choreographed like everybody. And so she reaches out to me and she's like, Will.i.am's doing an event on this day. Are you available? And I'm like, oh, let me check my very busy, very filled up with things to do schedule, right? I remember I lost my passport.
Where was it held?
So it was in Los Angeles, and I was in New York at the time.
Okay.
Up on Win. Oh my goodness, what's that avenue? It's because of the W, and it's that's where all the stuff happens. It's where the where like all the federal buildings are and everything. But I get this. I lost my passport, and I remember going to the airport, and they were not gonna let me on this flight, but they I was like, look, I gotta get to Los Angeles. And I think there was, in my mind, I don't know if there was like a later flight or anything I could do. I thought like, if I don't go now, but they did all the security check and everything. They let me on and, gave me like a voucher to come back. But,
so you got to LA.
Yeah, I get to LA. I'm good. Right. I did my thing. And right before, I think I went on after assignment or before assignment.
Okay.
But I remember being much more interested in like hear what Simon was saying. I was like, yo, that's really cool. Like he's like learned from the military and and it was just a resonance of like what he was saying, where he was getting his data points from and the adventure of that. And I think I went after him because he came up to me and said, yo, that was really cool what you did. Where are you? I live in New York. I live in New York too. And that began that relationship. So, I performed, I did my thing. Like we talked about earlier, the difference between changing opinions and changing behavior.
Yeah.
The first order of thinking was, opinion, and which I believed was kind of the point, right? You gather information, you gather things to change people's opinion, like their judgment that they verbalize or non-verbalize.
Yeah.
That was the extent. So I didn't even really know, like I know where I'm going and I want to do more poetry and I want to be on more stages and I think I want to get paid for it and all this other good stuff. Yeah. But again, I was just fascinated. I'm like, this guy's a speaker. He has this topic. It's really fascinating. And he's like working with the military. And the military finds this fascinating. Like the guys with the guns, like they're like listening to him, like what is that?
So instead of being struck by, I have to perform on a big stage, you're still this curious explorer, observer, wanderer of the human condition.
Yeah. I was like, wait, no, the world just got bigger.
You're like, I'm not nervous. Yeah. I'm actually curious about this that's going on over here and the connection of what he's, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, but here's the thing, to be honest with you, when learning to speak in front of people in the slam circuit really like
took
the
care
nervous,
of it.
because the nervousness, because you're getting judged right away. You're getting that feedback loop of like, bro, you're good, you're not good. So I didn't have like, this is not.
So you're trimming all the time.
All the time.
And picking up.
Oh yeah,
picking up
and editing live, like things work, don't work. Very much like a comedian practices, right?
Yeah.
Especially if the pieces, and I'm not saying it reduces nervousness at all. I'm talking about something that's as prepared as a slam poem that's been battle tested. It almost becomes like negligible at a certain point, right? So I was more like, okay, well, I am like, this is what I am. Like, okay, cool. Like, I'm at this conference. He's a musician. There's all this technology. There's a whole world that I had just been introduced to. Like, I met this young lady. She had a soccer ball that they kicked, and you kick the soccer ball, and it generates electricity, and that's how they were like generating electricity. The world had gotten way bigger than my poems immediately. It was like,
now check it, right?
Yeah.
Like some students today, man, they're like, I'm just going to be a blogger. I'm going to be a YouTuber.
Okay.
But that's not what you did, even though YouTube was helpful to you.
Oh, very much.
Right. You were just like, I'm doing a poem. And did you know that I want to go back to this because I think this is an interesting part of the story potentially. Did you know that you're being recorded and that it was being posted on YouTube originally? Because I think I remember that you didn't. Okay,
no, I did not know. It was there was a guy that had he had the rights at the Bowery to like film and post the Bowery stuff, and so it goes online, and I didn't do it, and then like one thing leads to another, and
So here's my not position, but my thought. That if you're really good at doing something, it's not about YouTubing. It's about being really good at doing the thing that gets captured and then played out to the world, however that is, right? And today, and I want to go to this part of our chat, right? Like, now what, right? So you've had these stages. You've written this book, Tonal Influence, which people can buy the book on Amazon. And it's not a book about, here's how you change your tone of voice. It's a book that gets people encourages folks to think about the connection between their body and their voice and their mind. It's like a triangle, right? It's triangulated in my mind. And I think even there's a triangle around those three words on your company website. Where do you serve yourself or the world going forward? Right? Is it about bigger is better, or is it about the right audiences, or is it about one person at a time? What's the philosophy from the philosopher within?
So I have a theory that most things that grow from an empathizing to systemizing, like the empathizing, systemizing, and then within the systemizing, empathizing has to be systematically implemented to further increase systemizing.
And this sounds like a poetry slam. A lot of words, man. But not really, only a couple of key ones. So give it to us slowly. That's a really, I like the tracking of that.
I mean, this might be like a,
this is your way of thinking, right? So this is a philosophy. It's not necessarily a business plan to
not at
change
all.
the world amid AI so that human intelligence can still survive through tonal influence, although that could be really hip.
Yeah, why not?
The
you take a seed, Well, let's take the human seed, which then hits the egg, and then the daughter cells split, and then that becomes an embryo, and then the wiring. You look at like embryology and how like the organs develop. It is fascinating how the human body begins to grow and what becomes what becomes the lungs, the heart, the diaphragm, the nervous system, and all these things split, and then reintegrate, split, reintegrate as something new. And then you're born and you're split with the umbilical cord, and you reintegrate with the mother by breastfeeding until the time it's time to split again. And then you reintegrate with, family, the world. You split, you grow, you become self-sufficient, when then you reintegrate back into humanity by, you meet someone, and then you do the process of the things that for then the seed to move. And then, right. So but empathizing, right, is this willful or necessary conjoining, right? Empathy, if I empathize with another human being, I am joining with them as if it's just me and them. Like it's just the seed and the egg. That's all that's here right now. One seed, one egg. Then the daughter cells split, and the new system, right? That systemized, or that you start to scale. That seed and that egg now begin to scale, and so you start a business. There's high empathy when there's a very small team, because you can be conjoined in a way that time and energy and effort allow. And then you start to get more employees and you start to systemize. You are a far cry from the seed and the egg, right? It's unrecognizable. And then, within that new system, there has to be things that congeal, that keep it together. And that's where the empathizing continues. And then you scale, and you scale so big that you have a human resources department, because it's basically the empathetic arm of a business.
Presumably, yes.
Yeah, presumably. That's where you would like them to be.
In good cases, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you have to have that in the model. Because in my mind, if you do one or the other too long, you'll have a problem, right? So like, say, for example, you have a child that's like 10 still breastfeeding. It's probably a problem, right?
Probably,
but then if you over systemize, right, then you have a cold sort of robotic kind of thing, and there's its own challenges there.
So you and I both, because we believe in martial arts as a practice that's worth holding, the yin-yang principle, and creating balance through opposites, complementary opposites, is part of the I Ching, is a really way of thinking about probabilities. And we want to have balance, and we have choice. And our choice to balance ourselves by understanding opposites is really important. So when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, oh yeah, like you explore the world, then you create a relationship, then you explore the relationship, then you create a child. Right? You have a business idea, you explore it, then you create some sort of service or product. Then you explore who you can put on the team to help bring it to market. Then you create the plan to bring it to, right? And so those opposites of explore and create has seemingly been fueling your life throughout many of the lived experiences that you shared. A bit of a pioneer quester archetype is what I would contend you are, right? With a little bit of inventor visionary thrown in there for good measure, in service to humanity. And as we move to close, I think of how important it is for students at any age or stage, but especially young folks who think that they could be college bound. Maybe that's the sheet music that's played into their ear, which is, it's cool, but they have to have choice.
Yeah.
Right. Autonomy is key. And when you have choice and you feel a sense of competence in something, like you did in using language, even with a delayed start, you really sort of leveraged your capacity to use language, to express yourself, to express views, to provide entertainment, to teach, that you then understand your relatedness to the world and individuality. Sometimes Jungian psychologists will say, oh, we're when I speak to them, like post-conference or, in my circle, say things like, your psyche can't be seen, but on it is etched a bit of an archetype that and off of that archetype, you see behaviors over time. And your individuation is the emergence of certain archetypes and different fields of play, right? It's almost like a position in a game, but it's almost undeniable that you'll lean more towards a combination of archetypal sort of form. So form comes out of field. And the form of Marshall Davis Jones came out of the field of these different fields that you presented to us today. So, I ask students and teachers, educators, and counselors to listen to this with an eye on those lessons that you've provided that have created your individual story path that allows you to story like you mean it, right? About your own life, because you are the author of it. You are self-authoring your life. And what a great life it can be. And that work life narrative, when it's integrated in sense making and brings meaning, it's not like story like you sort of mean it. It's like story like you mean it.
Yeah.
Really helps you then, monetize your talent, be able to hold relationships over time, as we have been able to do, because you have adhered to this tendency to study this thing from words to Legos to poetry to sentiment mapping to how to really honor how people can come one with their body or understand their body's relationship to their mind, or their mind to their body, to the voice that might not always be heard, this little dot in all of this space that could be representative of message. This is how I code it because of how I decide to be bodily. And I'm just honored to have you in this space. It's a vault. It's filled with treasures that we uncover together. I don't have a prescribed set of questions that I'm sort of ripping on, but I do have a method to this sort of dialogue that I hope you felt honors the different lived experiences that you may have already known about, but also the ones that you are reclaiming as part of the experience.
Man, I just noticed this. The Nuyorican is a worldwide mecca for poetry, historically speaking. And one of the things that stands out about it is its exposed brick. And the belief that there are lots of, like, if you could scrape the words or the ideas, the memories off of it, that's the first thing. The second thing is, for those who are thinking about going to school, I have hundreds of references from papers that were written by people like yourself that decided to study something deep enough at an institution that could afford to pay for you to do it. And if it wasn't for those institutions, there are lots of things that, would remain unquantified. And so as I return to the exposed brick and I return to an institution like this one, that is a higher education institution, there is meaning and wonder, and whatever you choose to do, you'll find your way and make something happen out of it.
Yeah, that's right. Wow. It's stories like these that become the new frame of reference, the new way to really provide modern mentorship to students who are in a technological world just like you and I.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. All right, my man. Story like you mean it, my man.
My guy.
Yeah, my guy.